Hello everyone and welcome to this special weekday Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising, with Philip Nothard and Curtis Hutchinson, bringing you all the chatter that matters across the franchised and independent dealer sectors.
Hello and welcome to Motor Trade Radio. Today we're delighted to be joined by Felipe Munoz, a senior analyst with JATO Dynamics, the global automotive research and data consultancy. Philippe's responsible for JATO's global car industry analysis, which he shares on a regular basis on LinkedIn. Now, Philip and I both follow him, and we're not alone, as he recently hit 200,000 followers on LinkedIn around the world, because he provides a constant source of invaluable insight on the auto industry across Europe, Asia, and North and South America. Philippe joins us today to share his views and insight on some of the big issues impacting the automotive sector. So welcome to the pod, Philippe.
Hi, Curtis. Thanks for having me here. I'm really happy talking to you and the team. Thank you.
No, it's our pleasure, Philippe. I think as Curtis put there, I do really enjoy everything you post on LinkedIn and obviously things that you do on your day job as well with your role at JATO. So it is our pleasure having you on here, and I've been looking forward to this chat and conversation with you for some time. So thank you for giving up your time for doing this today.
Anytime. It's always good talking to you, and let's see what we can talk about. Everything is changing so fast lately, so let's see.
Well, yes, it's keeping us busy, isn't it? That's the thing at the minute. It's keeping us very busy, trying to keep ahead of it. But I mean, as I say, welcome. And before we get started, can you give us some background on your career in automotive and obviously your role at JATO Dynamics?
Okay, so I'm originally from Colombia, South America. I moved to Italy 15 years ago because I wanted to work in the automotive industry. That's something I have forever, since I was born, actually. I'm always into cars, into what's going on in the industry. So I moved to Italy looking for job opportunities there. I finally got one in Fiat. I worked there, Fiat Chrysler, for some years in digital marketing. And then after that experience, I moved to JATO, where I'm now right now. And I am the PR and global analyst for the company, where basically I just follow the industry trends based on our data. And I talk to the press, or I write down white papers and content from what I find. And in addition to that, as you just mentioned before, I have my own social media channels about, of course, my passion, which is the car industry as well. And where, I've been somehow followed by many people, and which is good. I mean, I'm always talking about cars, so why don't create my own channels?
No, it's great. And I mean, obviously your experience in terms of that digital PR and marketing certainly is expressed in your social feeds. And I mean, one of the things you have recently posted is your analysis of the global car sales for 2024. Can you share some of the key takeaways that really stood out for you from that report?
Well, look, last year, according to the research I've done, getting information from each car maker, and in case there isn't some estimations, there were around 91 million light vehicles sold last year, which is almost 2% more than in 2023. So basically, we're starting with a good result considering the challenges the industry is facing. But when you look at the detail by car maker, it's clear that the growth was driven by the Chinese car makers. So what we're seeing, especially since 2023, is that China is shaking the global markets and is accelerating its expansion globally. And of course, this is having an impact on the traditional car makers, what I call the legacy car makers around the world. Their position is not as safe as it used to be, because the Chinese are really coming up with very interesting competitive cars, and they are, of course, grabbing the attention of many consumers around the world. So basically, yes, the growth we saw last year is mainly because of the Chinese car makers. So just to give you an example, something which was interesting to see was the BYD, for example. BYD is now the world's seventh biggest car maker in terms of volume, sales volume. And it was the 10th in 2023. So it climbed some positions. It outsold other big car makers such as Honda, Nissan, and Suzuki, for example. And now it's the seventh in terms. And when we're talking of electric vehicles, BYD is the second one behind Tesla, the pure electric, I mean. So, and BYD is just one example. Then you have Geely, you have Chery, many other Chinese car makers that are really driving sales up in the world. That's pretty much a summary of what happened last year. Of course, there are winners and losers. Generally speaking, the European car makers saw big drops or are not living their best times right now. But and the Americans as well. I mean, the traditional Americans, because we need to differentiate between the three big from Detroit and Tesla. And the Japanese, of course, lagging behind in terms of electric cars, but still leading the market. Toyota is still the biggest by far, and its electric cars made up just 1.3% of its global sales. So that's also the other side of the story, because on one side we have the Chinese gaining traction because of the electrics, but on the other side, the leader continues to be Toyota, and Toyota barely sells electric cars. So it's interesting. This is fascinating. This is a fascinating industry. We're always seeing changes, especially now under the Trump administration. Everything is changing, but that's pretty much what happened last year.
And Philippe, turning specifically to Europe, as you've outlined, you closely follow and report on EV transition trends. Who for you are the countries in Europe who are actually forging ahead with EVs, and who do you feel are falling behind?
So first of all, Europe as a region, as a market, is lagging behind China in terms of electric cars, but it's quite ahead of the US, right? So whenever I talk about the electric cars global market, I always say that there are three speeds. The fast one, the fast lane, where China is going, the one in the middle, where Europe is, and the US and most of the world is driving. Europe is going somehow fast, but it could be faster. Last year, the electric cars, the registrations of new electric cars in Europe fell by 1% to almost 2 million units. And from that total, the UK, I must say, was the biggest market. We are talking of 382,000 units, up by 21% compared to 2023. So, which is quite good, considering, especially when you compare it to Germany, which is the second largest, very, very close with 381,000 units, just 1,000 units behind. But the demand there, the registrations there, decreased by 27%. So when you see what happened in Europe, then you find out that the UK is performing very well. This is mainly because of a wider offer, more choices, more restrictions on combustion engine cars. And so, yeah, the UK is quite well positioned there. But there's still a lot to do, because when you compare that to the total market, well, we're still not there. I mean, 382,000 out of almost 2 million units. registered last year. So there's still a lot to do. But there are good cases in Europe, such as the UK. There are also bad cases, as in Southern Europe, for example. Italy, Spain, for example, the penetration of electric vehicles is really low. And we're talking of two big countries in Europe. But everything is related to infrastructure, to the government policies, and also the perception the consumers have, right? So, yeah, that's pretty much the situation of electrics in Europe.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Philip, because I think a lot of listeners will be surprised to hear that the UK is actually leading the way in terms of EV sales across Europe, and it is ahead of Germany. And you made some interesting comments about Southern Europe. Do you have any thoughts on why those Southern European countries are falling behind Spain and Italy, you mentioned?
Well, look, yeah, mainly is infrastructure. I mean, the first thing that you think is, oh, income, right? Because yes, electric cars are usually more expensive than combustion cars. So, and Southern Europe is not as rich as Northern Europe. So that would be the first easy answer. But when you look at the detail, in the case of Italy, for example, northern Italy, the income in northern Italy, where I am right now, is pretty much as big or sometimes even higher than some northern European countries. So the average income in northern Italy is sometimes even higher than in Germany, for example. So that's not really the answer. There are infrastructure issues and especially cultural issues. There
Yes.
are still a lot of things to do regarding telling the population or educating the consumers around the benefits of electric cars. There are a lot of myths that, of course, are reinforced by the fact that the second-hand value of electric cars, not only in Southern Europe, but I would say globally, is not helping the electric cars. I mean, these cars lose a lot of value when they are being sold in the used market, more than the combustion engine cars. So this is not helping either. And then, of course, you have an addiction, let's say, in Italy, for example, to small cars. The parking, the roads, and everything is more complex. So they love these city cars, and the offer in terms of electric cars in the city car segment is still very limited. So you have many things. Also, you have the role of Stellantis in Italy, which is the home maker, and Stellantis is still struggling to take off when it's about electric cars. And of course, people are buying mainly local products, right? So if the local car maker is not really offering a lot of electric cars, of course, the demand is gonna buy less electric cars. So many things, many aspects. Greece is another example. The infrastructure, lack of income. So yeah, many things happening at the same time.
And sticking with Europe, Philippe, and risking getting into the world of politics, but what's your view on, I mean, Tesla, you mentioned before about BYD's growth and things like this and their position in the market, but what's the view on Tesla's falling sales on the continent? Is it down where they are in the product cycle, or are we seeing that alongside the negative reaction to some of Elon's high-profile political agenda and opinions?
Well, that's a topic I've been talking quite a lot over the last weeks because yes, you're right. Tesla's registrations in Europe are dropping 45% in January, and the preliminary data for February is not encouraging as well. But the thing is that many things are happening at the same time. When he endorsed Donald Trump in August, I think last year, my first thought was, oh, this is risky because you usually don't see entrepreneurs or CEOs publicly endorsing. Of course, they always take a position, but they never made it public. In this case, he participated in the campaign and now is participating in the government. And I thought it was risky, and still it is risky because yes, you are putting your brands in the middle of the political debate. And as we know, the US is quite divided in terms of politics, and also Europe. So his positions are, of course, jeopardizing his brand. But at the same time, when this was happening, the company was also facing other issues regarding its model lineup. As we know, the Model Y was the top-selling car, the world's top-selling car in 2023. I still don't know if it was in 2024. I'm still checking some data because the race between the Model Y and RAV4 is quite tight last year. But anyway, if it wasn't the top seller, it was the second. And so we're talking of a very popular car that is going through a model changeover. Even though it's a restyling, because it's still the same car, when we're talking of a Tesla, we're talking of a big thing. We're talking of something that people buy massively in China, in the US, and Europe, because it was also the top selling car in Europe in 2023 and among the top 10 in Europe last year. So when this happens in the industry, we usually see a drop because the dealers get rid of the previous version and they wait for the new one, or even the production is changed and affected by this model changeover. This is exactly what is going on with the Model Y. The Model Y, the new version, the updated version, was revealed in January, and it's been slowly introduced into the markets. And it takes time. It takes usually this process takes around 2-3 months. So when this happens, of course, the people who know, most people tend to wait for the new one. So this also is also affecting sales, right?
Yeah.
The thing is, the problem is, and this is how I came up to the conclusion that yes, Elon Musk positions are affecting the brand, is what is going on with the Model 3. Because the Model 3 was updated in late 2023, and it should be, by now, it should be having big growth. Because yes, the model this car is already available everywhere, and everybody knows it's there. But when you look at the details for Europe in January, yes, the Model 3 was also posting big drops. So that should not be the case. I understand in the case of the Model Y, but not in the case of the Model 3. So many things are happening at the same time, and this is why we're seeing these big drops at Tesla.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'd agree. And I mean, what's your take? I mean, there was an announcement last week that BYD and Tesla will collaborate to reduce the number of combustion engine cars on the road. I mean, what's your view on that? Do you think that's something that we're going to see more often? Do you think this is a shrewd move by BYD and Tesla to make this collaboration?
Yes, I think that's what we're gonna see from now on. More collaboration with China. The traditional car industry is on an existential crisis, and the only way out of it, in my opinion, is not through government support, it's not through incentive, it's just with more collaboration with the guys that know how to do competitive electric cars, and these are the Chinese. If you want to have a better position, not only in China, because now this is, I mean, the arrival of Chinese cars is also happening in other countries, and it's already affecting the position of the traditional car makers. If you want to keep playing, you cannot just how do you say, to battle against the Chinese, but you should work with them. There should be more collaboration. It can be through joint ventures, through alliances, mergers, whatever, however you want to call it. But that's the only way out. Actually, Volkswagen, it took time to react, but it's now actively collaborating with some Chinese car makers to develop cars for China, because they realize that they might be very good at making cars, combustion engine cars. They've been doing it for 120 years. I mean, the global, the Western car industry. But when it's about electric cars, well, the West is not that well positioned. So China knows this. That's why they are betting a lot on what they call the new energy vehicles. And the West needs to cooperate with these guys. So this example of Tesla and BYD is just the beginning of a lot of cooperation that I think we're going to see in the coming months and years.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think that seems to be the trajectory of this change. But we'll be back straight after this break with more from Felipe talking about the global and European car market.
You're listening to all the chatter that matters on a special weekday episode of Motor Trade Radio, powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising.
Welcome back. We're talking to leading industry analyst Felipe Munoz on this special weekday episode. Philippe, let's turn to what we currently know about the US automotive tariffs and the likely impact on the US auto industry, which sources materials and parts from its Mexican and Canadian neighbours. Now, we know these tariffs have been temporarily suspended. That was announced last week as we record this. But what's your take on the likely impact if they are to be introduced at some stage in the future?
Yes, you're right. This is the trending topic these days, actually these weeks, because it's changing all the time.
Yes.
But sooner or later we'll see these tariffs, and that's a reality that the industry needs to deal with. That it comes up at a very bad time because, as I said, the Western industry is already facing other big challenges, particularly the European one in China, for example. That Chinese consumers are not buying foreign brands anymore, but they want to buy just local brands. That's one big problem the Germans especially have. Mm-hmm. Then you have the European market that doesn't grow anymore. So now you have this third problem, which is more restrictions to trade with the US. I think it's gonna have a big impact on most of the industry, particularly the European car makers, so mainly Volkswagen. Volkswagen is the most exposed car maker to these tariffs because even though it has a production factory in the US, most of what they sell there is coming from whether Mexico or Europe. So these two markets are targeted by Trump with his tariffs in addition to Canada. And so, yes, the goal might be good, of course. Trump wants to increase the local production of cars. But the way to get there is going to be tricky because it's not as simple as just moving the production from Mexico to the US. But it takes time because you also need the suppliers. And that's the problem here. That's the very difficult part. The suppliers are not an easy thing to move. There are many things that are part of a car. And if these tariffs come into effect, these suppliers, it might that they're going to be also impacted by them. So yes, Volkswagen is the most exposed, but of course we also have General Motors, Ford, and the Japanese, which are also bringing cars from Mexico. Mexico is the biggest foreign origin for the car sales in the US. According to our data, Mexico was around 2.3 million units, where million cars were sold that came from Mexico. That's more or less 14% of the car sales in the US. So that's a big thing, right? And then if you add Canada, which is also an important source of production for Toyota and Stellantis, well, you have more problems there too.
And that's an interesting point you make, Philippe. I mean, certainly when you look at Volkswagen, because they've got production in Mexico, so they're affected because they're supplying into the US. But what about some of the European manufacturers who are exporting finished cars from Europe, especially the likes of Stellantis, for example? How will they be affected by these tariffs if they come in?
Well, yes, there are products coming from the European Union, but mainly it's for the Germans.
Yeah,
The top exporter from Germany, from Europe, is Volkswagen, the Volkswagen Group, followed by Mercedes and BMW, because they all, as I said, they all have plants in the US, but they are also supplying it with products from their German plants, mainly, particularly sedans and small SUVs. They were clever enough to understand that they had to build the big SUVs in the US, and that's what exactly what's happening right now, especially except for Audi. But Mercedes and BMW are already making a lot of SUVs in the US. So the tariffs are likely to affect the performance, the sales performance of their sedan lineup, which is
right.
already declining. I mean, when you look at the car sales in the US and globally mainly, sedans are not what you call saloons in the UK. Is not are not selling as much as in the past. So these tariffs, in my opinion, what they're going to do is just basically kill the saloon, imported saloon in the US. Stellantis, as you said, is also selling cars made in Europe in the US, but very few, because we're talking of some models from Jeep, the Renegade, but it's not really popular in the US. The Dodge Hornet, which is the Alfa Romeo's Tonale, but it's not a big thing for Stellantis. The main problem for Stellantis is Mexico and Canada. But when we talk about Europe, the most of the biggest casualties here are going to be the Germans and Volvo. Yeah.
And I mean, you're talking about Stellantis there, and obviously we've recently with Carlos going, and obviously they're sharing their financial losses for 2024. I mean, there's a lot for them to get through, but obviously they're now bringing the Leapmotor partnership in that ties back into that Chinese partnership view earlier, didn't we, in terms of BYD and Tesla, that, Stellantis involved with that Leapmotors. I mean, what's your view on Stellantis? Do you think they're just at the start of turning the business around and getting their models and their strategies right?
Stellantis as an idea is really good. It's always good to collaborate with your peers, and this is what, let's say, FCA, Fiat Chrysler, did with PSA when they merged 3 years ago or 4 years ago. So as an idea, it's good because they are better prepared to face the competition from China. This is what Honda and Nissan wanted to do. At the end, they are not doing it. But it's inevitable to see these kind of mergers when the global market is being more competitive. The problem that I see is that they were not. I mean, PSA and FCA were not really. How do you say? They did not complement each other very well because they were more or less playing in the same segments. So today, Stellantis has 14 brands, and most of them are mainstream brands uh, playing in the ABC segment, competing each other. And when you have this thing, of course, there is some kind of cannibalization, and you need to reposition these brands. They've been trying to do so, but it's not yet clear. Some positioning of Fiat compared to Citroën, for example, or Opel Vauxhall compared to Peugeot. So they still need to find their soul, their positioning. And of course, when you have a merger, you expect fewer brands. I mean, 14 brands is a lot, and you're not even number one in the world. Volkswagen Group is the second in the world, and they have 8 brands, and most of them are quite different. They are well positioned. So I was expecting actually that the Stellantis would get rid of some brands or integrate them, and that's what I think is going to happen when the new CEO comes this year. Stellantis cannot continue just having so many brands, many of them with dire need of products, because at the end, what they have is just a lot of brands with one or two products, and that's not good for the image of each brand. So that's what I think is going to happen. The operation with Leapmotor is, in my opinion, it's quite interesting. They are, let's say, collaborating with a small car maker from China, which is growing very fast. We still need to see what's going to happen to the product itself, because most of Leapmotor's products are not what Europeans buy. I mean, they have a lot of saloons. They have one tiny city car that is not very competitive, in my opinion. And the other SUVs are, I don't see them fitting very well in Europe. So I think there's a lot of work to do regarding this product. But as I said, you need to collaborate with Chinese, and this is a good way to do it for Stellantis.
And finally, Philippe, and really following on from that point you made, which emergent Chinese brands are impressing you in Europe in terms of the way that they've launched and their current sales? Which brands really stand out for you?
In Europe,
Yeah.
I think the most impressive one last year was BYD. BYD is showing it is really aggressive, and it's really strong, because last year they sold around 50,000 cars in Europe, and we're talking of a very unknown brand for the majority of people, because we
Yes.
are car geeks, we know these things, but most of the people who buy a car, they don't even care about the car. They just want to move from point A to point B. So they don't barely pay attention to what these brands are. So 50,000 units for an unknown brand with a limited dealer network, it's quite remarkable, especially when you are only selling electric cars or plug-in hybrids. I think BYD is doing a lot of progress, and we need to also to consider that these cars were all imported from China. So they are growing fast, even with imported products. And so we need to wait to see what's going to happen when they start selling the cars that they will produce in Hungary. And I think they are already selling them, or they are getting ready for that. So if those cars are going to come from Hungary, you would expect even more. It would be more competitive, because they would not face the tariffs that currently the electric vehicles from China have in Europe. So I think I would expect even an accelerated growth this year. BYD is one of them, but you also have MG. MG is very interesting as a case, because what they are doing, the Chinese are doing, is just they bought this traditional brand from the UK with 100 years of history, and they just how do you say resuscitation? How do you say when you come back from life? Anyway,
Resuscitated it. Yes.
Okay. They resuscitated
Yeah.
MG with a very competitive lineup, very interesting cars in terms of design, in terms of quality. And that's paying off, because today MG is the biggest Chinese car maker in Europe. And they made a lot of progress with their electric cars. The MG4, for example, was one of the top selling electric cars in Europe. And now lately they are testing the hybrid segments, which is also interesting, because these products, MG3, for example, or the new MG ZS, are very interesting as hybrids, and their price is really good. So I'm just saying this because you usually think, oh, the Chinese are it's a threat with their electric cars, which is not only with the electric cars. I mean, they can do other non-electric cars in a very competitive way as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's I'm just wondering when the European Commission is going to respond to this new, let's say, call it threat from hybrid cars from China, because the MG3 and MG7S are selling very well. They are very good, and they have very good prices. So MG is the other good example of what the Chinese can do with this operation of saving time in terms of awareness, in terms of heritage, buying a brand from the West.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think there's so much going on. I think you're finishing on a good point there. I think the whole hybrid technology, in terms of, because there is a lot of people think about Chinese manufacturers and they go straight to EVs, don't they? Whereas, as you say there, the MG products, even BYD, they have hybrid technology.
Yeah.
They have the reverse hybrid technology, don't they? Come in, if not, it's already on the road. Where you have the EV as the main drivetrain with a petrol backup. So it's the reverse of the hybrid technology, but with an EV as the main fuel source, should we say. So I think there's a lot going on in that space. And I think people get the MG and everybody else is happening very, very quickly. So I mean, just to finish up there, I mean, you covered a lot there. I mean, we've gone from global automotive into Europe, a little bit of politics there, into the challenges of the US, and what we wake up every single morning to find out what's new from the US each day. And I really appreciate your time today, Philippe. I think anybody listening to the podcast today, if you're not following Philippe on LinkedIn particularly, then please do. Very informative, some of the visuals, the charts, etc., to give you that global lens on what's happening in the automotive sector is valuable, very, very insightful. So, I mean, a huge thank you from Curtis and I for taking the time out today, Philippe, to share some of your insight and knowledge on the sector.
No, it's a pleasure talking to you, Philip and Curtis. It was really good talking about many things, actually. As you just said, global industry politics, Europe, electrics, and Chinese. And this is a fascinating industry. It's always changing, and we're living exciting times. Even though, as a CEO from a Western car maker, it might not be as exciting as it is for us.
Yes, yeah.
They're in big trouble. But to see how the industry adapts to the new changes is fascinating. Some of them are taking longer. Some of them are very fast to respond. But all of this is really interesting to see. In addition, just to say something in addition to what you just said, you can also follow me on Instagram, Car Industry Analysis, where I also post a lot of things. And thanks for having me here, guys. Very much.
It's our pleasure. Absolutely, it's our pleasure. It's great talking to you and getting that lens, particularly from Europe, as well, on where you see the automotive sector.
Yeah, definitely. Many thanks for joining us, Philip. We really do appreciate your time, and we hope you've enjoyed this weekday special. We're back with the headlines on Saturday. Until then, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
Thank you for listening to this special weekday Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. Philip and Curtis will be back with the week's big motor retailing headlines on Saturday. Live, on demand, wherever you are, on your podcast feed.